Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Cloudicorns, a podcast about SAP, Google Cloud, and everything that is awesome in tech. I'm super excited today. I'm Lucia Diego because I have a group of friends here from Gekkobrain. But first, Diego, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm also very excited to have Jens and Anders with us today. So I'm right pass it to them so they can introduce themselves. Maybe Jens, you can go first and tell us who you are and what you're doing. And yeah, let's go.
Sure. Well, my name is Jens Strandbygaard. I was a co-founder and CEO of Gekkobrain until its acquisition by ServiceNow last week, and I'm now a senior director of product management at ServiceNow. So I know about the commercial parts.
Awesome. Thank you. And Anders?
Yeah, hi. My name is Anders Mygind, and I used to be the CTO of Gekkobrain, and now I'm the director of a team at ServiceNow, which is called ERP Foundations. So heading up the what will become the new Gekkobrain software or the ServiceNow ERP Foundation software in ServiceNow.
Awesome. So thank you guys for joining us. We're very happy to have you here. So I guess first we can go with a very basic question. So what does Gekkobrain, do, or now
What
ServiceNow?
did we
So
do?
yeah, what do you do, guys, for a living? Tell us.
Yeah. So the company was actually started as a result of us being SAP. Having worked with SAP for many years, being involved in HANA upgrade projects, and we could see that the existing tools, like SAP's own tools, were somewhat lacking in terms of creating overview of what needed to be done in a HANA migration situation. So we developed an analysis that built on top existing SAP analysis to improve on them to correlate some of those stats and also add multiple or stats from additional data sources to make it much more useful and minimize the scope of migration projects. And since then, we added a piece that could do some automatic code remediation for technical issues. We added the entire S4 HANA layer and the ability to again look at not only how many S4 issues you had, but how complex they were and how much time that would take. And on top of that, an effort to help customers decide on brownfield migrations or greenfield migrations, understanding how the code and the code layer was connected to the business processes, we added what we call flows, which is a business process mining application that actually mines the flows in SAP and can visualize the business processes and show you where is all the custom code connected to business process and business process steps. So that's actually what we do, and you can say that's a very a technical, nerdy approach to everything, and that's because we are all nerds in Gekkobrain.
This is why we invite you in the first place, to talk.
Yeah,
Yes.
you only want nerds here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually I met Jens at Google Next about 2 years ago in
Mm.
London, and I was blown away by first the demo, going all the way into the code remediation, being having an ABAP background myself and understanding how bad it can get for companies that have had SAP for a while and have all of this custom code and need to migrate it when they go into S/4HANA. I was blown away by the simplicity of the approach and the depth of knowledge that everybody had. So we were instantly vibing with the nerdiness of the
Yes,
Gecko Brain team. And I never actually
definitely.
asked you where did the name come from?
Well, the official reply is that it's because a gecko, its brain is wired to catch bugs, so it will. You have a gecko brain. The truth is that it was in a sauna under the influence of a little bit too much alcohol. We then came up with which domain have we had for the longest, and that turned out to be gecko brain, so we chose that. But luckily, it works very well for what we're doing.
It's really smart.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So guys, you have a lot of experience, working with S4 HANA migrations with customers and so on and so forth. So how does it look like, when you go into these customers with your approach? how does it look like migrating to S4 these days?
Sure. I'll let Anders answer that
Yeah.
because now that sounds technical.
Right. But so we are technical people, so I can say that it falls into three buckets. Right. It falls into
Yes.
it's a totally new install or a greenfield, and then it's the one where they just simply do a system copy and then they try to, you know, make their way through the upgrade, and then there's the one where they try to lift as much as possible, still do a fresh install, and then lift as much as possible over, and so, and I think it very much depends on what kind of customer it is, and there's a total business case for many customers to do the brownfield where they just do a system copy and do the upgrade. I know that I know this is not the politically correct answer to give, but it makes sense for many customers to do that if they've done a huge investment and if they know what they have, and if they know that what they have is not something which will be provided to them by SAP, then the effort of re-engineering everything is quite high. And keep in mind that these budgets are always stretched thin at the end of the day to get through an upgrade where you really you have to know you don't many customers will not know how happy they will be with S4 until they've been in S4 for a while. So selling the business case of what it is they're getting is very difficult. So rather I think a lot of customers tend to go into it from a risk management perspective, and that is also why some of them choose to go greenfield, because they simply don't know what they have, and then it makes total sense because there can be a lot of legacy code in there which is not running anymore, and then they can use our tools to find out how much is not run and how much is impacted, because it also comes down to how much is impacted. Like some customers will have a lot of custom code which is not impacted, so it's think of it as a Venn diagram, right? So if you happen to have in a system which seems to be faring quite well, and you know that all the custom code that you have is run all the time, so then that makes sense. But the decision is difficult to get to. If you just go with a readiness report, you're just not gonna know that, honestly. And if you get an external partner in there, chances are they don't know your system either. So chances are they're going to make general recommendations, and chances are they're going to be motivated by getting as many hours in there as possible, unless it's the fixed price conversion. So
Yeah.
So there are those different customers, and then there's the other one. The one we have a customer that are merging several systems. So then they made the choice that they're going to be consolidating systems when they go into S4. And
that's also going from region based to single instance type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So they have they forked out their code, let's say 10 years ago or 5 years ago, for some reason, and made a copy, and then they've developed it in one direction and gone in the other direction with the other system copy, and now they would like to merge it back, and that also makes sense, I would say. If
we do see a lot of cleanup going on right now, where people are sort of preparing for the S4 journey, so they're not sort of starting it next month, but they know there will be in 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Yeah. So along that route, we can see that they've started to look for overview and insight, and then trying to figure out what's actually worth preserving, as Anna said, which investments are worth protecting, and where can we sort of go towards a more clean digital core, and then try to get back to something that is slightly more manageable, and that's something that I think makes a lot of sense. Just get it cleaned up long before we called it housekeeping in the old times. It's just getting under wraps and understanding what's there and what's actually doing.
It used to be something that customers did more often, I think, cleaned up their code from time to time.
Yeah.
This has gotten out of fashion, maybe because there's a lot of external providers in there, so you don't have that same overview what's in your box anymore. So housekeeping becomes more difficult. The disparate teams are doing your software. But yeah, it makes sense to clean it up, keep the core as clean as possible, of course.
Yeah, we've seen some dirty cores over the time. Okay, Gekkobrain, I'd say.
Yeah, dirty core. That's a good term. Yeah.
That brings to an interesting follow-up. So, how did you evolve all the way to where the product is now? How did you get to where you are now, including the acquisition by ServiceNow, by the way? Congratulations on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks a lot. It's it's a typical entrepreneur story. We start out with one idea, and then me being the salesman of the company, try to sell it. And when that fails, it must be because the product is wrong. So we go back and we reinvent and go in a slightly different direction. And when I can't sell that, we then try a third direction. And then we start seeing some traction at some point. So it's all a matter of being able to constantly change direction, because what you think is a very good idea, when you start putting it in front of customers and asking them for money for it, there's a huge difference. That's the proof of the pudding, is that if they don't want to pay, something's not wrong. It's not generating the value it should generate. And then, as you know, we've been working very closely with Google Cloud over the years. That's also given us a lot of input on how can we do things that are different. We want to disrupt to a certain extent a lot of these things that happen. So it's in our DNA as nerds, right? So we want to do something different, and that means that we talk to customers, we have ideas, and then we try some of it out, and we find some pilot customers, and we push it in that direction, and we start to see a change in the product. But also, you can say when Anders came in, he has a slightly different background than the rest, so he's as nerdy as us. He came in like a year later than the rest, and he has a longer education, so he's much brighter than we are. And we also put him together with a team of scientists, so data scientists, and we took on a PhD. So all of a sudden we got some real science into Gekkobrain, and that then, with Anders' insight into SAP and the rest of the team's insight into SAP and this mathematical approach, then all of a sudden the product really became really, really powerful. It could do stuff that we just had not seen before. And I won't go into all the details of what it can do, but it's quite impressive what we're actually able to do with the data that we look at in SAP. So I think that was the biggest change, single change. The rest has been small maneuvers in the market to see, how on earth am I going to generate cash flow to pay salaries next month? Whereas this one was slightly more long-term and more visionary, and then at the same time it was connected to everything else. We always built on what we had. We didn't sort of scrap things. We just said, we've got this, so how do we then move in this direction? So it's become it's a very lively development cycle, but still, you could say the past year we've been much more adamant about managing our sprints, because it can very quickly grow to something that's outside of our control. So that's also given us a slightly more gray hair.
I bet. And
Yeah.
since we're talking about the insides of product management, because it sounds a lot like product management, right? You just spoke
It
about
is.
costs, which takes me to how do you define the price, or how is pricing defined?
Yeah. We try to look at the value, of course. We look at what value does it generate to the customer. And one thing that's important, when Mogens, who came up with the original idea, contacted us and said, I've got an idea for a business. He wanted it to be $50 a month. And then, we said, you're never going to be able to sell anything to an SAP customer at $50 a month, because they'll not trust the value if you put that price tag on it. So it's got to be at a level that customers feel comfortable with, but it's also got to generate that value. Otherwise, they won't feel comfortable with it. So you can say it's a matter of trying to get as close to that value as possible. So, you can't exactly say it's per, generated by success, but, let's say if we can save them, if you take the code remediation, that's easier. You can say if you've got 5,000 issues that we fix, then in that case, you may have saved like 500 hours. What's the value of those 500 hours? That is relatively easy. But you have a tool like Insights that looking at at everything. So it's finding out if a dump is expensive or a dump is cheap. And what's the value in avoiding one replenishment process from dumping? It can be an incredible amount of money. What's the value of being able to actually talk to your consultants about the way you want to move forward with your migration project? You actually know what you're talking about. That can be very valuable, but more difficult to put a price on. So in those cases, it's often a matter of talking to the customers, seeing if they feel comfortable with the price policy. But that for a startup, there's always an issue because we never know how to put a price on what we do. We just know we have to put a price on it and see if we can reflect some value on that price. But that's also like everything else. It's a process of trial and error, I'd say.
Well, that's
Was that a good answer?
Yeah.
But let me also add, like you asked, how have we evolved the product? So we started off as a reporting. When Mogens thought about this, he wanted to do a slice and dice, basically, like a bit of a BI report on the migration output from the SAP Code Inspector. And the reason why he wanted to do that was good, really good, because many times different parts of your organization are going to be responsible for the decision that if they want to go with something after the upgrade or not. So it made sense to have a pie chart and a slice and dice option on the results. Right? And that's why Mogens said that we shouldn't be overpricing this, but he underpriced it, obviously. But so it made sense in the beginning because this was a proof of concept that will this provide value, right? Then we started to think about, well, after the upgrades are done, we were still under the impression that the upgrades will be coming quickly, and we all know that the upgrades are not really they're it's not moving as quick as everybody thought they would be moving. So I thought, well, we're actually quite good at writing app, so we should make an observability tool, like a DevOps tool. Try to find out where the problems are, and then fix those problems as getting back to housekeeping, basically. Get good performing app. Also because Fiori apps are everywhere, SharePoint sites, ServiceNow integrations, other RPA agents are in there to basically the SAP is a system of record. It can only handle that many transactions per second, right? There's a limit. There's a physical limit to that. And so the observability, what we call insights, actually made a lot of sense. And then it just also made sense to evolve the product into, and actually that's when we started talking to the machine learning expert from Copenhagen University. It's like, can you look at this data set and say, like, how should you not write software? Can you say, well, then there was this guy, he made this problem, and then the other guy tried to fix it this way, and that turned out to be a good way. It wasn't the standard way of doing it, but it turned out to be a good way. So, giving like a practical, real-world training set of how you should write software, and it should be, real-world driven instead of assumption-driven. But then, as Jens said, it never goes as you think it should go. It goes in some other way, and we thought, well, let's also try to annotate these software with where they're coming from. And so we digged around for a while in the system, and we thought that, well, this makes a lot of sense. And then it just happens that the guy that we were assigned, that he was a process mining expert, as much as he was a computer scientist, right? So then I guess it just took off from there, and yeah. So it's been and like Jens said, it's been really good because we've constantly been able to connect the stuff that we did before, just layered on top and on top and on top. And so we haven't really lost the visibility back to migrating, which is where it started. So that's been pretty cool, I think. Instead of throwing stuff out and say this was just a mistake, we just added some more to it.
Yeah. And since I think you already touched a little bit on it, but how does how will consistently go wrong at customers? What will you say? What will be the 2 or 3 most common things that you consistently go from customer A to B to C, and you're always finding at least those 2 or 3 things?
I think migrating stuff that they don't need or fixing stuff that they don't need to fix. or running, because you can, instead of, using new S4 functionality, you will many times see that they're just running old R3 or ECC in S4, because the transaction codes are still there, they still work, they haven't been simplified, SAP keeps them alive. So you can see customers just basically, they haven't taken, the shrink wrap is still on the new transaction codes, and they're not using it, right? So they definitely didn't get any enough value for money for that migration. So I would think that the whole planning phase seems to be not going as they thought, and for some reason they just don't seem to re-engineer their processes as they should. Yeah. But can I just add something from before, because we talked about our Google partnership. I think one of the things that we really understood from the Google partnership is that replatforming business processes is a really good idea. Right? Don't take the whole end-to-end thing, but take the stuff out which makes sense not to have in the S4 system, because it doesn't really have anything to do with S4, or maybe it belongs closer to good machine learning libraries, for example, or whatever that might be, rather than you see all this traffic going in and out of the SAP system, which doesn't make sense at all, right? If all the functionality you really need is not in SAP but somewhere else, you should be looking at replatforming it.
Yeah, I think that goes in line with what we were saying before about keeping the core clean, right? So it's also clean of let
Yes.
the best tool for each thing resolve the problem, not put everything just everywhere because you can.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So speaking of recommendations then to customers, what would you recommend to customers who are planning on migrating today? Besides installing, of course, Gekkobrain and reaching out.
Yeah, we can come back to what what Gekkobrain will look like so in the future. But yeah, I agree. It's but I'd say again from my point of view, what I see in the projects that we're involved with, the ones that seem to have certain success, they understand what they're doing. So instead of just handing everything over to an SI, they actually try to figure out what it is that they're looking at and trying to get that overview and the insight, so they know what to ask, who to ask, and who to from the company itself to add to the project. So the knowledgeable customers seem to be the ones that have the most success because they know what's actually going on. So I think that is a key thing. Look for that insight on your own data, on your own system, and understand what you're actually up against. Find out how complex it is, where the complexities are, where the risks are, and then how to talk to people. Because we all know that if you just hire an SI and ask them to do everything, they will also charge you for everything. And 1 hour here, 1 hour there, it can be very, very expensive very quickly. So that's one thing seen from my more of a commercial side. I'm sure Anders can add some technical insight to that as well. But that's what I've seen success with in the ones I've interfaced with.
Yeah, I'm always nervous when people ask me what they should do, because I think that should not be my decision, right? That should be their decision. And then I'm not my sales genes are not that well developed, so I simply don't know how to do that. But I would say that it's a little bit like you're going somewhere, but you don't exactly know where you're starting, because a lot of customers don't know where they are. So know where you are, because otherwise you can't plan how far you have to go. I think basically everybody knows the destination, but they just don't know where they how long they have to get there. And that's all about getting back into touch with the custom code that they have, and you'd be I think all our customers are surprised how the business processes run in their system. I haven't met a single customer that have said, "Oh yeah, that's exactly how we pictured it would look like." That's like nobody says that, right? There was the one customer in particular They knew that they had a little bit of custom code before they hit, they hit the Babby sales order create. But they had no idea it was that big. It was like an entire order management system that in set tables, right? The whole thing was like a big ecom in 20 set tables, and they were big, and they so when you ran the scan, it looked pretty good, they would be pretty okay. But that was because this entire lump of code was just before anything happened at all. So it reached into all the master data tables and took care of everything, and then in the end it made the sales order, and the sales order went through. Right? But obviously that whole thing, it was like, okay, my God, what is that? Like, how big is that? That's huge, right? So and you have to know, otherwise you don't know. So. Yeah, and then I can't tell you what to do because I don't know who you are. So
Wow. Sounds like a whole experience. So yeah, Jens, you touched on something there, which is what it looks like for Gekkobrain and ServiceNow.
Yeah. So at the risk of sounding a little bit marketing here, we have been working with ServiceNow for quite some time in a partner capacity where we're looking at joint opportunities, and it turned out that there was a very good fit strategically between us and ServiceNow. What we'll be doing is that we're using, as Anna says, we'll be on the ERP side, we'll be looking at analyzing the systems of record to figure out where are there processes or process steps that could be successfully migrated to the Creator Workflow platform at ServiceNow, so these digital workflows. And the idea is that what Anna just suggested here, could be a very good example of where Gekkobrain actually adds a lot of value, because we'll be able to look into the ERP systems, figure out what's going on, where's there a lot of they have a lot of customization and some custom code underneath a process step that is difficult to maintain, difficult to migrate, expensive, and maybe clunky, and certainly performance impacted. How can we take that and package all that and all the Z tables that Anders are mentioning? How can we take all that and move that to the Creator Workflow platform? So instead of programming your way forward, you actually clean out the core and say, now my core is clean. Instead, you just connect in from the Creator Workflows, and you then orchestrate the process in a low-code, no-code environment. So that's a much more intelligent way of doing this going forward. And in order to figure out what's going on inside these ERP systems, this is where you need the competency and the technology that we have developed in Gekkobrain, because that's exactly what it does, and it can do. It can find anything if we just know what to look for. And we'd be looking for these heavy customized areas, as Anders mentioned, and then suggest how that could be done in a low-code, no-code environment. So that's what we'll be doing in ServiceNow, and where Gekkobrain and the team will evolve going forward. And in a much more structured way, I may add, than in our startup days. Now we are, we have a direction. And we'll be aiming for that. We don't have to worry about cash flow all the time. We can actually develop something as it should be.
Yeah, the ServiceNow calls that citizen developers. Like anybody can be a developer.
Yeah.
And I think that so, and I don't think that ServiceNow. And I know that ServiceNow is not saying that there will be no like specialized
developers.
Proper developers. Mm-hmm. I hesitate to use the term proper developers, but anyway, so I think from my perspective, I think it just makes a lot of sense. It's like anyway. So if you have a citizen developer, he's gonna do an app fairly quick, and then he's gonna see if that solves the business need or not. I've been, for many years sitting next to SharePoint developers who did great apps in SharePoint. They would sit close to business key users, and they would make an app, and that app would do exactly what it should do. And if it didn't, it was quickly changed to do something a little bit more than what it should. So it's very fluid, it's very plastic, and then I think there's a lot of learning. To see where all these things are popping up. So all the citizen developed apps, where they are. It's a little bit like watching the fish finder when you're out fishing, right? So this is where it's to be going that way. So and so that becomes like a cool way of understanding where you should do even more.
Invest more and develop more. Absolutely. Yeah.
SAP could look at that and say, well, this is something where we need to add some general standard functionality, because that seems to be where people are building out their systems with these citizen developed apps, right? So
we see this trend like very heavily right now, like these local no-code platforms, and I didn't call it proper. It was pro developer. That's at least that's the term that I'm seeing in the marketing slides. That you have the pro developer, the citizen developer, and then the users. But 100%. It's something that we're seeing at least for the past 3 or 4 years, and I think recently there were some acquisitions on the SAP side and so on and so forth. Very 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 interesting, guy. So we definitely are going to put on this podcast. Everybody that is listening, please follow the press release. We're going to put on the description of the YouTube video. We are kind of getting to an end. If it wasn't for us, most likely we'll spend many more hours with you guys, because there's a lot of things to pick your brains, your Gekkobrains. Definitely very interesting content and stuff that you have been creating for during these past years. But if you want to close, with a message to our audience, like, do you want to say something else to kind of wrap it up in terms of what is your future, as you were mentioning? What are we are going to see in the next 12 to 24 months from your partnership, or actually working as ServiceNow now?
Well, I can say from my side, I really look forward to working on business development globally, and not also payrolls monthly, and auditors and banks and all those things that a startup normally has to face. So that'll be really interesting. And then on top of that, we had other choices than ServiceNow when the sort of acquisition process started, and ServiceNow was definitely our choice. With no, we had no doubt when they suddenly popped up as a potential acquirer of Gekkobrain. It's just an amazing organization. We're totally blown away by how professional they are and how efficient they are. It's something we're really looking forward to. So I think you can expect a lot of cool technology from us, and a lot of additions to the ERP space that will blow you away. I promise we will.
That's awesome. All right. So that being said, I hand it over to you.
Yes, I'd like to thank Jens and Anders. It's always great chatting with you. I'm super excited for your journey as well. So we'll have some links for people to get in touch as well if they want to explore more, they want to learn more. So that they're as blown away as I was when I first saw your demos, when I first met you at Google Next. So thanks a lot for joining us today. Thanks a lot to our audience. Thank you for the feedback. I hope you stick with us. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. And yeah, it's the first time I think we record during daytime today, because we have guests from a European time zone. So hope this time the lighting at least was different for those who are watching the video. And it was great to meet you all, and looking forward to our next episode as well. Have an awesome rest of the day.